of what we're going to talk about tonight. Perfectionism keeps us on edge. We haven't done this in a while. I was hoping Kyle was going to be here tonight too, but he'll get this. We're trying to bring him up to speed as much as possible with some of these foundational topics, and perfectionism is certainly one of them. Perfectionism is kind of a misnomer. It's easy to think that it relates to achievement, or quality of work. And it can, but there's a difference between, say, being a perfectionist and the sickness or the irrational belief or the irrational thinking of perfectionism. And perfectionism is a personality trait or a defect, is a personality defect. It is the irrational belief that something, someone, me, my experience must be a certain way. That's not a bad thing, in order for me to be okay, or in order for me to feel safe, in order for me to feel like I am good enough. And so that's the defect, just like old Chuck C pointed out in that what I was just reading. It can be a good thing. There's nothing wrong, and we should all have that drive to want to achieve at high levels at times, or do a really good job with something, whether it's just a little task or mopping the floor or whatever it is. You want to do a really good job with it. You want to do the best you can do. In perfectionism, if we don't achieve that, then it's a knock on our identity. We confuse our performance with our value. And so it keeps us in this constant quest of trying to be good enough. Actually, let me back up. Trying to perform better than, just to feel like we're good enough. And it's not just related to performance. It has to do with how we have our experience. The example we always give is like, you can go to a restaurant and you're meeting with your family or your friends, and you're going to go eat some Mexican food, and it's going to be a fun night, and you've been looking forward to it all week. But then you get there, and the parking is full, and you're having to drive around a little bit, and now you got to wait in line, and you start noticing, well, those people were here after us, and they got seated before us, and you start noticing all of the defect, what you perceive as a defect in that environment. And before you even get seated at your table, you're already irritable, restless, discontent, and kind of starting to check out. We can all have those experiences. The important thing is to understand what's happening so we can reset in that moment. Like that old saying, we can start our day over at any time. You can start your experience over at any time. But if you don't understand what you're experiencing, what's actually happening, that your sudden anxiety, I don't know what happened. I've been looking forward to this all week. I was so excited on the way over here, and now I'm just mad. Now I'm just upset. I don't even want to finish this. I just want to go home. Well, that's perfectionism at work. That's us having unrealistic expectations, and then having the experience that isn't meeting those expectations. And now we've personalized it, we've internalized it, and so our sense of self drops or feels threatened. So, that's another thing that goes along with that is when we hear this all the time, we need to learn how to not have any expectations. But, here's a good, let me see, here's this, I always mean to put this on the board, but I never do. Here's an example of kind of like if this is like normal, this is where most people are able to live. And then every once in a while, you can overachieve, and that's good. And sometimes we underachieve, but we stay pretty close to the baseline. And when we overachieve, that's a good thing. We can be proud of that. And when we underachieve, we want to take a look at it. We want to make some corrections. In perfectionism, this is, relate this to Shameful Shameless. This is who we think we are. So if I'm overachieving, then we think that we are enough. or if we're having just the right experience, it's exactly the way I was expecting it to be, I feel enough, right? So it's a negative orientation to begin with, because we start with an unrealistic expectation, just like Chuck C was just talking about in that book. We start with an unrealistic expectation. Did you really think you were going to go to dinner on a Friday night at a very popular restaurant at prime dinner time and think we were just going to find the spot right next to the door and you weren't going to have to wait for a table? And intellectually we know that would be reality. But if we're not really thinking in terms of reality and we're thinking more in terms of will I feel good enough, will this meet my expectation, you're always going to find yourself in trouble, because we're looking at the wrong things. If you start with low self-esteem, you're always going to be looking for things in your environment to boost that, which is where our compulsions come from. Right? That's why when we get something that we want, then we want more of it, and we want it now, which is one of the characteristics that we'll get into. So remember, the actual definition of perfectionism is the irrational belief, and that's the kicker. It's irrational that me or my environment must meet my expectations or else. That's a good way to think of it. It's like all or nothing. I'm either getting what I want, having the experience that I'm expecting, performing at whatever level I think I'm supposed to be performing at any given time, or I'm no good. Shameful, shameless. Perfectionism is us in shameless mode. Okay, so I already talked about that. It's not about high achievement, it's about identity. And this third point, this is really important moving through. So think about this. So where does this come from? You guys remember the trauma topic. It tends to be developed at a young age from a perceived sense of lack of control. Whatever that is, doesn't matter how it happens, but that is what happens. We start developing this perceived sense that I'm not in control, or I only feel in control if these things are in order or these things are in place. And then we start developing that survival mode, which includes all or nothing. I either am getting everything I want, doing everything I want, or I just don't want it at all. And remember, these are conversations we're just having in our head. They're just spinning around. These are conclusions that we're drawing, that we're only as good as our performance. And we get really good at adapting to that and managing that in a way where we feel safe. Some friends call and they say, hey, we're going to go whatever. We're going to go try out the new batting cages. We're going to go to the river park. We're going to go do something fun. And we might be concerned that, who all's going? Right? This is perfectionism is behind these kinds of questions. Well, who all is going to be there? Well, Bob's going to be there, Cindy's going to be there, Joanne's going to be there, Frank's going to be there. And if that is satisfactory, if that doesn't feel threatening to us, then we will agree to go. So in perfectionism, we're making our experience more about how we're going to feel about it than the experience in and of itself. Having the experience, fellowship, who cares who's going to be there? We're going to be in the sun, and we're going to be outside, and we're going to be together, and we're going to be doing things that are going to be exciting, etc., etc. And so-and-so's going through a rough time, and maybe I can talk to so-and-so and talk about what I did when I was going through a tough time. We don't think like that in perfectionism. We're hyper aware of what might be threatening in our environment. And it's not generally what we think. It's not obvious things. And it could be different for each of us because of, depending on your trauma perspective. It can absolutely be different. Okay, so let's get into these symptoms, and everybody who suffers from perfectionism will recognize these. Avoidance of quietness and stillness. That's tough, right? That's tough for the patient. That's tough for us as family members. Avoiding quietness and stillness. And remember, this isn't exclusive to substance abuse. These are just defects that anybody can possess that we never knew how to deal with. It's just, if you have a propensity towards substance abuse, that's probably going to become your self-medication. But it can be other things too. It doesn't have to. We don't have to develop into full-blown addiction. We could be very compulsive with work. We can become very compulsive with shopping, with gambling, with anything, doom scrolling, as we say. You just get stuck on the internet or whatever. It relates to anybody who feels like they spend life kind of in a roller coaster, maybe some highs and some lows. Just when you start to feel comfortable and you think, oh, okay, everything's good, I've got this in place, that in place, and then boom, some sort of perceived catastrophe. And now you're irritable and you're restless and you're discontent and you're anxious and you're looking to regain a sense of control, so that then I won't have to be anxious, then I won't have to be mad, then I won't have to be restless. And we repeat that cycle throughout our life until change occurs. So understanding this about all of us, we can all have this. Understanding it is the key to healing it, to changing it, recognizing what's happening. It's not really about performance. It's about who we think we are, and that's, of course, in our dysfunction, that's one of our biggest problems, is we're not really sure who we are apart from our experiences or maybe material possessions. We will place excessive demands on ourselves and others, and that's those unrealistic expectations. They know that I'm going through a hard time right now, and they haven't even reached out. Believing that everyone's supposed to read my mind and they should just know because I know that they know I'm going through a hard time, and they should have already called by now, and since they didn't, now I'm mad and I'm even more hurt, and whatever it can be. But that's what it looks like when we're kind of projecting our unrealistic expectations. Expecting others or ourselves to do something, perform something that's not realistic. Not being able to accept it, reality, even though sometimes reality is what it is and it might be hurtful. But what keeps us stuck is waiting for it, anticipating it, needing it, irrationally believing that it should be coming. That's why it's irrational. It's an irrational belief. It leads to the if-only syndrome. Well, if only this had happened, and if only they had thought of me sooner, and if only they'd remembered my birthday, and if only there wasn't as much traffic, and if only I'd get a raise, and if only people would notice that I just did that really cool thing, and if only my spouse would behave, or if only, whatever, my neighbor would do something different, or if I could get what I want. It just goes on and on and on. The if-only syndrome, it's crazy, because when you really start making an effort to recognize this in yourself and kind of be willing to hit the pause button and look at yourself whenever you're anxious, irritable, restless, discontent, a little off kilter, you'll see this. You'll recognize just how often we kind of get stuck in that if-only syndrome, which, of course, the AA Big Book talks about that. But that's what's happening. The if-only syndrome. I could feel better. I would be fine right now if only you were different. If you would, I wouldn't have to be angry right now if only. I could be super happy if only. The only reason that I'm mad is because you. The only reason I'm upset, the only reason I'm whatever, it's because of you. It's an irrational belief. So why would we need that? Why do we need so desperately to have our if onlys fulfilled? Remember, it starts with a sense or perceived loss of control, and perfectionism is all geared toward us regaining a sense of control. But that's the lie, because we've never lost control, right? It's in our thinking. It's trauma driven. It's I only feel good about me when everything is perfect. Which maybe sound ridiculous, but that's really what's happening. If everything is the way I want it, then I feel good enough about myself. And so we will place excessive demands on ourselves too. You see it a lot, in the early parts of this kind of journey. As soon as we start to feel better, we start thinking, okay, I'm good. I don't need to finish that thing. I don't need to do that anymore. I definitely don't need to take all those medicines that got me to this good place in the first place. I want to stop doing all the things that got me to a good place, and I'm ready to go up 5 levels. If I could just get my car fixed, get my job, then I'll really be good. That's what it looks like when we're placing unrealistic demands on ourselves. But we will do it. Excessive demands, and none of those things are bad things. But if we're going to change, if we're going to heal, if we're going to take out time and space to learn who we really are apart from those things, then pay attention to the excessive demands that you place on yourself, including our environment. Oh, the way a lot of people determine their tip when a restaurant. I've heard this from a lot of people. They will determine their tip based on how the waiter or the waitress kept their water full. So if they come back and they fill the water, and I know that's frustrating to you because I know you're a good tipper. If they come back constantly and they keep my glass full, then I'll tip well. But if they don't, then I don't tip as well. And that's always been a really good example for me with perfectionism. Placing excessive demands on ourselves and others in order to feel okay. What is that about anyway? That's about gaining a sense of control. That kind of leads into more of our sickness. Like we're so special that, we need special treatment, and we can do that and all kinds of things. But another symptom is all or nothing. That all or nothing thinking. That looks like, there's an example over here, but I'm either having the experience that I'm expecting, or I don't want to have the experience at all. And to protect ourselves, remember, it's a safety issue in order to feel good enough, in order to feel safe. And that's why when we get invited to maybe do something that we're not sure of, we have 20 questions. Well, who's going to be there? How long is it going to take? What's going to happen once we get there? What time will we finish? What am I supposed to be wearing? Should I bring anything? These are all fine questions. But in perfectionism, we need those answers because it's threatening to who we believe we are. It's really, perfectionism is really kind of the epitome of this self-absorption, like the Big Book talks about, this self-centeredness, that I'm in constant protect self mode. And so I need to be aware of anything in the environment that might serve as a threat. It's crazy when you really start, if you really start taking this information and exploring it within yourself throughout your day, your week, or whatever. And remember, your cue is whenever you're feeling irritable, restless, discontent, anxious, that's the time to hit the pause button, whatever, in the car, walking, sitting, doesn't matter what you're doing, just hit the pause button. And instead of focusing on the situation you think you're having, start focusing on your perspective. Start focusing on what you think is happening. And then be willing, to be honest with yourself about it and kind of bring this to bear. What am I afraid of not getting in this situation? What does that mean to me? What does that remind me of? What basic threat do I feel is being compromised, etc., etc.? That's how we move through this. We obsess over details of any task. Everybody can relate to that. There's nothing wrong with obsessing over details. If you want to, you really, especially if it's, at least with me, if it's something that I'm not super familiar with, like cleaning carburetors, and I'm having to kind of learn on the fly, I can get really obsessive about the details. I just want to do it right. I don't want to screw it up so much that now I'm going to have to buy a carburetor. The problem with perfectionism is I can't screw it up, or I won't be good enough. Right? That's the perfectionism part. And then you can run with it from there. It's like, well, other people will think this thing. Other people won't be impressed. Other people will think I'm an idiot. Other people will. That's a person who isn't quite comfortable in their own skin yet. You know, that's another good way of thinking about it. Easily frustrated, right? Because you just get easily frustrated. That's what road rage is about, right? We get so easily frustrated. Something's not happening the way I wish it was happening, and I don't know how to respond. And so we get frustrated. That's what anxiety is. That's what those easily irritated traits are. I'm not having the experience that I was expecting, and I don't know how to operate in that space. Versus being able to accept that it's just not a perfect experience. I can still do some things. I can at least put it on hold until I can come back to it later. In perfectionism, we are personalizing the experience and then internalizing the experience. So I need my situation to be a certain way, or I don't feel good enough about myself. Fearing failure, we can give up very quickly. Right? The minute you might be working on something, or you have a task or a project or whatever. But here's the thing, fearing failure, you might not even start it. You might not even start it. You know, procrastination, people can think of procrastination as a lazy issue, but it's not lazy. Procrastination is really driven by this perfectionism, this fear of not doing it a certain way. And so we will think about it, we will ruminate on it, we'll spin it around over and over, we might talk about it, but we can be so afraid to take action on it because we're not sure that it's going to play out the way we think it's supposed to play out. And remember that other element in perfectionism is, here's normal, but we're thinking, man, if I can't achieve this, then I shouldn't even start. So we can spend an awful lot of time getting ready to do something and never actually do it. Because we're not thinking this, we're thinking this. Just to be good enough. That's the sickness right there. Just to be good enough, we have to perform better than. Right? Shameful, shameless. Shameful, shameless. Difficulty making decisions. Following feels easier. Following feels safer. It feels safe to let everyone else make decisions. What do you want for dinner tonight? I don't know. You decide. Right? That's really what that is. That's kind of a small little example of perfectionism at play. Hey, what do you want to do about the thing in the yard? Oh, I don't know. You figure it out. Well, what about this other thing? I don't know. Just you make a decision and I'll do whatever you want. Just tell me what you decide. Does that mean that that person isn't capable of making decisions? No, of course not. But that's what it can look like when we're scared to death to make a decision. Think about that. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. Whatever you want. We're so afraid that if we pick, whatever, if we pick hot dogs and then nobody ends up liking the hot dogs, right? We think it's our fault. If you've ever caught yourself apologizing for a decision, maybe you agreed. Maybe you said, hey, let's go try this new restaurant, and you went to the restaurant and nobody liked the food. And then you found yourself apologizing. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry that I just thought it was going to be different. You know, who hasn't done that? Heck, I've done that. But what are we doing? We're taking responsibility for something that doesn't belong to us because how it's making us feel. It makes us feel less than. We were really hoping that it was going to be amazing, and then I would feel good enough. I would feel like I belong. I'm worthy of my friend group now because I picked the right restaurant. That's what our sickness looks like. It's a restaurant. We don't own it. We didn't make the food. It was just a suggestion. Nobody else was deciding. We still had a good time hanging out together, and now we're gonna go get some ice cream. Same experience, but two different perspectives, right? Same thing, but in one, because we're coming from this irrational belief that I'm only as good as my experience or my performance, and the other one is just a healthy sense of self, and still can enjoy it because it wasn't really about the food. It was about getting together, and hopefully the food tastes good. But we got to spend time with our friend group or our family or whatever. If you wanna set high goals, go for it. You should. But remember, don't ever let yourself forget what it means when you fall short. Because that's reality. We will fall short at times. It doesn't mean what we're afraid that it means. We're afraid that when I fall short, when I set a high goal for myself and I fall short, we think it means I failed. I'm a loser. I'm not good enough. But that's not what it means. That fear of that can keep us from even setting any kind of goals. It'll set us from it'll keep us from dreaming. It'll keep us from operating out of our vision and really wanting to do some exciting things with our life because we're so afraid that we're going to underachieve and it feels safer just to follow. That's the coolest thing in recovery, or one of them. I know I say that about everything, but in recovery we learn how to move through those fears anyway, and that's really how you overcome perfectionism, or at least kind of learn how to catch it and redirect and regroup yourself. Is moving through some challenges that in the past we wouldn't have done, and it could be as simple as picking something that you've always wanted to do but you've always put it off, and then in recovery, or as we change and we start growing and we start gaining a stronger sense of ourselves, even though the fear is still there, we do it anyway, knowing that I might really mess this deal up, but I'm going to go give it a shot. Because what happens is we usually succeed at it. Maybe not the way we think we should, maybe not in these excessive demands sort of way, but that's how we start building self-esteem. We start doing things that we don't necessarily feel like doing, but we do them because we know that they're important. And then that's how we keep growing. Here's two specific strategies that we have used to kind of exacerbate our perfectionism. We either need to have control or we isolate. Isolating is a form of control, right? You'll never feel safer than when you're just checking out, right? We can just avoid, and it feels safe. And think about that for a minute, because if you have a history of isolating, you're an isolator. I was an isolator. I was a big isolator, big avoider. It was easy. It felt safe. But even though we might be missing a lot of responsibilities that we know we should be doing, it just feels too risky. We're willing to lose things that we would, the consequence of not taking care of our responsibilities to feel safe. That's how detrimental perfectionism can be. So we either need control, or we if we can't have complete control of our experience, then we just avoid the experience. And in the shameful, shameless extreme, like we talked about last week, there is no middle ground. There's no humanness. There's no, well, I really want to try to do this. I'm going to try my best, and I'm going to learn some things along the way. And if it doesn't work out, then I'm going to keep trying because I really want to do it. There's none of that until we begin to grow, until we understand who we are apart from that. And the second one, which is not safe, it's not healthy, but it becomes one of our top defense mechanisms, and that's hypervigilance. We develop a hypervigilance toward our environment, right? Because if I'm needing, remember, our identity is tied to this. So if I'm needing everything in my environment to be a certain way, including people, to behave a certain way, think a certain thing about me, think a certain thing in general, then I'm gonna be very zeroed in on anything that might be threatening to that. And that's what hypervigilance is, where we become chronically aware of details that could pose a threat to our identity. Because remember, our identity is equal to our performance or our experience. So in order for me to feel good enough, to feel like I'm me, then I have to be performing at a certain level, or I have to be experiencing at a certain level, which means I need everybody else to be performing at a certain level. And then we can't, we cycle that around, and we can't figure out why we have so much chronic anxiety, restlessness, irritability, discontentment, irrationally believing that if only syndrome, that if only everyone else and everything else would just do right, or line up, or get in line, or act right, or whatever it is, then I wouldn't have to feel like this. That is classic perfectionism. And we've survived on that for a very long time. Anybody who's had a history of a lot of chronic anxiety and life has felt like a roller coaster, we've been doing it for a long time. So recognize that hypervigilance. Sometimes it might be very obvious to you. Sometimes you might not think that applies. And so you need to spend time really kind of evaluating it, that self-awareness. Here's some of the consequences that we get from this defective personality trait. Low self-esteem, obviously, right? If you don't know who you are, and your esteem or your sense of self is contingent on the experience that you're having, you're going to have low self-esteem. When things work out the way we want them to work out and we feel good, that's not esteem. You're just happy because now you feel a sense of control. Real esteem is built through accomplishment, right? You're accomplishing, and so you can feel good about yourself. But even when you're under accomplishing, you can feel good about yourself because you have the right perspective. You have a human perspective. You don't have these unrealistic expectations. Guilt is a factor. Pessimism, rigidity, compulsiveness, which is more, impulsiveness, which is now. We lack motivation, right? It's not. Think about this. We all can go through periods of time where maybe life hasn't been working out for a while. It's easy to give up because you're not really sure. So we feel depressed, we feel anxious, we feel less than, and nobody wants to feel like that. So it's easy just to check out sometimes because we don't know what to do. So we just lack the motivation to do anything. We don't want to try anything. Fortunately, when we we don't have to know what the solutions are. We just have to be willing to put ourselves in a process of change. You know, we talk about this all the time. The minute we wave the white flag and we say, okay, I'm done. I don't know what to do, but I know I need some change. And we seek help, God will always put in front of us the right people. And that's where we start building motivation. That's where we start finding hope. That's where we change our belief in ourselves. Because consequences of perfectionism is we lack a belief in ourselves. We put a lot of belief into other people, and we put a lot of belief into our experience or our situation, hoping, begging, pleading, wishing that my situation would be just so that then I would be okay. Which is a complete lack of self, or a complete lack of belief in self. We don't believe in ourselves, we believe in our situation. We don't believe in ourselves, but we believe in other people if only they would get it right. And same thing with the experiences, restaurant, driving, whatever. Your daily life as we encounter the world. And a final consequence is we just feel stuck. Which makes a lot of sense, with what I've described. I mean, that just sounds miserable. We just cycle through needing everything, everyone, every situation to be a certain way so that I can be happy. But what's really happening is it's our identity so that I can feel like I'm good enough. And so I obviously quit writing. So the solution isn't on the board, but I'll tell you what the solution is. So how do we move past perfectionism? How do we begin to heal this? And it starts with recognizing the defect, that it's a defect. It's not an asset. It's keeping us stuck. It's keeping us sick. It keeps us in this endless cycle of needing something else to be a certain way so that I can then be okay. And it's never happened, and it's never going to happen. Every once in a while we get lucky. We can, remember, one of our strategies is to have control. We can exert control to get, say, people to act a certain way, or to get our situation to be a certain way. We can do that at times, but we still don't get the sense of self from it, right? It's all an illusion. We just feel better in that moment. But as soon as that's gone, now I need the next situation to be a certain way, and then the next person to be a certain way. So the more you really explore this within yourself and you recognize what it's costing you, the second part is to be willing to take time to explore it. We've been talking a lot about self-awareness lately. Being willing to really look at how we're thinking about ourselves, because that's the bottom line. Start thinking less about others and what they're doing, or situations and the characteristics of that, and start thinking more about, well, what am I thinking? And what do I think all that means? What's my perspective? In fact, that would be a good one to do next week, perspective. And what do I think it all means? And if you'll have those conversations with yourself, what you'll arrive at are basic threats, or threats to our basic needs. It's, what were you thinking in this situation? What did you need to happen, and why? Well, I was needing, I just wish the restaurant wasn't so crowded. Okay, well, what do you think it means that it was crowded? Well, it just made me uncomfortable, and now I was going to have to wait, and it was going to make me late for this thing, and we start feeling not good enough, right? It starts impacting our sense of safety, or our sense of security, or our sense of belonging, or our sense of respect, or love, right? When things aren't working out, we think someone's not loving us, etc., etc., etc. What can't happen is just being aware of this defect will not make any difference. You have to couple it with what comes next. And what comes next is you exploring you. We're actually going to get out of here earlier tonight. Maybe not early, but earlier. Do you guys? So I'm going to wrap it up. Do you guys want to share anything? That's a lot of information packed in a short period of time. What's one? I'll give you a cheat. What's one symptom that you recognize in yourself?
I've recognized a bunch of them in myself, but they're not current. I went through a lot of that stuff that I can look back and give you examples of. But,
what do you think changed? Do you think that was really part of your experience that you had, that you've shared before?
Just growing up.
Oh, yeah.
Just evolving, for lack of the proper word, growing up.
Getting to know you. Yeah.
And the tip thing, I tip, but not overly, but I just wanted to clear that up. If someone's giving you bad service, they know it. You might be having a bad day. And if they're giving you bad service, they're probably not in a $100 a plate restaurant, because those people put on their game faces. That's where they make their money at.
Professional waiters, for sure. Yeah.
Is minister the word I'm looking for? And I've had this discussion with the pastor before. He brought it up. If you give a person a tip, the regular tip, 20%, whatever, and they're having a bad day, and if you don't tip them and they see you later or in church, wherever on the street, it's going to be hard for you to even talk to these people. You know what I mean? And, if they're having a bad day, they know whether they get good or bad service or not. And, that's part of the service industry is a tip. But they'll be like, they probably have some type of feeling if you give them a regular tip, they're having a bad day and they didn't get tips from other customers, they will remember you. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong for them not to give you good service, but everyone gets a free pass, and if they treat everyone bad every day, they're not going to have that job for long, is all I can say.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things you talk about.
I like that.
I ate at Hutchins in Frisco a couple times last year. That is one of the best barbecue places I've ever ate at.
And I've never been. I've never been there.
One of the best.
Yeah. Well, they got a free plug tonight. So anybody, that's funny because we just did a video on California, the homeless population. But anyway, you have to look it up. Did we put that on YouTube yet? I think we did. TikTok and YouTube. Talking about the homeless population and body brokering. Okay, so the top one, avoidance of quietness and stillness. That's one that's always jumped out at me. What is that? It's just kind of this need to always feel busy. And with me, I know where it comes from. I grew up with a single mom who was superwoman and could work multiple jobs and come home and just she was just always making stuff happen. And she wanted to make stuff happen for us too. So if we were sitting around not doing anything, she'd give us a list of things to do. So without realizing it then, I got really good at getting busy before she asked. Right? It's like, you come home from school and latchkey kids come home from school and you're hanging out, you're making a mess, but as soon as the garage door opens, we jump up, and me and my brothers, and we start cleaning, and everything looks great before she even gets into the house. Or you hear her walking down the hall, and oh gosh, I got to rearrange the books in the bookshelf, and then that kind of stuff just sticks with you to where, whatever, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, it's just become you. And unless you really explore that and take a look at that, is that healthy? Is that real? Is that what's going on with me that I feel uncomfortable being still? Right? Getting still, be still and know that I am God. And then we can't figure out why we feel so disconnected. Well, sit down for 5 minutes. Practice this. Everybody should practice this. Sit down. Make yourself sit down. You get to pick the spot for 5 minutes. No phone, not even turned on, so you can't hear your notifications, nothing. No headset, no book, no magazine, no nothing. Sit still for 5 minutes but pay attention to your thinking. Don't just let thoughts roll around. Try to practice emptying your thoughts and see how well you do with that. In fact, you might even start with 2 minutes, because 5 minutes is a long time when, if we've operated out of perfectionism for so long and we're always used to busy, it doesn't mean you have to always be physically busy. We just can be spinning stuff around in our mind. We overthink, right? We overthink, we overplan, we over-coordinate, we over everything. That's the compulsiveness of perfectionism. But it doesn't necessarily come with productivity, right? And there's a difference between obsessive compulsive, where you're checking the blinds 6 times in the last 5 minutes. Check the blind, check the door, check this, check that, redo this, redo that. But that can be a part of it. Some of those purposeless rituals can be a part of it. But notice how uncomfortable or how difficult it can be just to be still. Be still. No music, no nothing. Just be still and empty your thoughts. And you probably start getting a little fidgety. Where does that come from? Because that's obviously a normal behavior. Why is it so uncomfortable to just be still? So we will avoid that. We will avoid quietness. We gotta, if we're not having a conversation, we want our earbuds in. We want some music playing, whether it's traffic or something. And if I don't have anything to do with my hands, and I'm gonna grab my phone. And every time we feel something uncomfortable, we reach for something else. And just because we have cell phones today, it's always something. It's like, well, I'm gonna go ride my bike. Well, you see this a lot with smoking. Tobacco. It's like I feel uncomfortable. I'm gonna go have a cigarette. I'm bored. I'm gonna go have a cigarette. I'm bored. I'm gonna go eat something. I'm bored. I'm gonna go. But remember what boredom means. I'm bored means you're just thinking about yourself too much. Right? It's not a real thing. I know it's a real definition, but it's not normal to feel bored. Boredom is I know at any given time I have at least 5 responsibilities I could go and take care of, but none of them sound exciting. I just want to be entertained. And since the world isn't entertaining me, I want to go and do something that will give me instant gratification. Really, that's all boredom really is, if you think about it. I'm bored is never anything you'll ever even think in recovery, because you're establishing you apart from all that stuff. But we can still exhibit some avoidance of quietness and stillness. How are you? Can you relate to that one?
Me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Avoidance of quietness and stillness.
The one that sticks out to me is 7.
Oh. Okay, 7.
He just is terrible.
Oh.
It's always on me, and I'm like,
Making
can you
this-
just help? Like, make a decision.
So-
I don't want to make all the decisions.
And that kind of adds an extra layer. So what if you're in your relationship, it's present, these symptoms are present in each person?
I was going to say, like, I see both of us.
Yeah.
Especially in the strategies, like the control
Yeah.
and isolate. I'm control and he's isolate, so we can butt heads.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And so it seems like it's a good match, but of course it's not healthy for either of us to be in that place, so we've got to grow through it. And that's actually a really good example of how, even though one person is the patient, how the dynamic changes in the relationship. It's easy to think, if the drunk or the addict would just get better, then we would all be good again. And it just doesn't really work like that. What happens is one person starts to get healthy and confident and builds self-esteem and becomes more productive, but then everyone else in the family is still kind of stuck in their own whatever defects, codependency, needing a problem to solve. And that's not unusual. You know, look out for that. I'm sure you and Tina probably already had that conversation, but I think that's one of the big ones. When our family member starts to get better, if we've been solving all the problems for so long, and now there's not any problems to solve, we can kind of lose our sense of self for a while. It's a good indicator of how, you know, in codependency, it kind of that process becomes us. That's our identity. It's like, well, I'm the problem solver, and it's amazing because I don't think it's unusual that like enablers or codependency when it comes to addiction is mostly women, because women are like master problem solvers by nature. I grew up watching my mom be that. It's amazing. Men, I don't know. I'm speaking in general terms. Men, I think in general, we're kind of clueless when it comes to coordinating really important things. But that's good, and you're obviously open to that. That's neat. That's the goal, man. That is the goal. You guys want to add anything? I won't say another word about the T word. Okay, we can't talk about the T word anymore. It's done. Okay, anyway, thank you all for watching on Facebook, and we'll see you next week. Did I get it? No. I got to do it back.